Hello friends, now I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite poems, the poem titled The Death of the Hired Man, written by Robert Frost. Sometimes when you read some poems, they just refuse to leave your mind, and this is one such poem that left such a deep impact on my mind. This is one poem that I often read and reread again and again. It never fails to touch me, and I often, whenever I teach a class where I have to do a poem of Robert Frost, I always make it a point to read this one to them, not because it's prescribed, but just because it's so beautiful. So let's go to this poem. Now this one, it's a long narrative. You know about Robert Frost, of course. I'm not going to elaborate. He's one of the most popular American poets, Robert Frost. You must have read many of his poems. To name a few of his popular ones, we have Birches, Mending Wall, what else? The Road Not Taken, Stopping by the Woods. So Robert Frost is not a new name to you. The Death of the Hired Man is a relatively unknown poem because I have not seen it being prescribed in the syllabi of many universities, but it's undoubtedly a beautiful one. So this one, it's a long narrative poem, and it was written in 1914, 1-4. And it speaks, there are three characters in this poem. We know that generally Robert Frost is known as the poet of nature. Here it is not exactly nature, but it is the rural life. He writes about his rural life. The settings are often rural. He talks about the place where he lived, the New England countryside. This is one such poem which tells us about the people there who lived there. And so we have three characters here. There is this lady called Mary and her husband Warren, and there is also this hired man called Silas. Okay, so in the beginning of the poem, it's as I said, it's a long narrative. It's pretty long, and it is about a man called Silas who was a hired man, a hired worker in the homestead of Warren and Mary. And one day, unannounced, he just left them, and now he has come back in a very poor condition, very ill and hardly able to move. So that is how the poem begins. So let me just read it first. The Death of the Hired Man by Robert Frost. Mary sat musing on the lamp flame at the table, waiting for Warren. When she heard his step, she ran on tiptoe down the darkened passage to meet him in the doorway with the news and put him on his guard. Silas is back. She pushed him outward with her through the door and shut it after her. Be kind, she said. She took the market things from Warren's arms and set them on the porch, then threw him down to sit beside her on the wooden steps. So it is evening, most probably, because there is a lamp burning at the table, and she is sitting there waiting for Warren. And when she hears Warren coming in, she runs on tiptoe. Means she is trying not to make noise. And she goes down, she meets him at the doorway, and she pushes him back. I mean, in the sense, she doesn't allow him to come inside. She pushes him back out of the door, and she goes along with him, and she tells him almost in a whisper, Silas is back. And she says, be kind. So she takes everything. He has gone to the market. He has come back with things. So she takes everything, puts them down on the porch, And she pulls him down, and both of them sit on the wooden steps. And so Warren asks, it's a dialogue between the husband and the wife, most of the poem. It's a conversation between the two of them. So then he asks, when was I ever anything but kind to him? But I'll not have the fellow back, he said. I told him so last haying, didn't I? If he left then, I said, that ended it. So this is what had happened. The last season, when the haying was going on, the harvest season, when Warren was really in need of help, he had already warned him, because this Silas had this habit, we should understand, of leaving suddenly on short notice. And so he said, what do you mean by saying be kind to him? Was I ever anything but kind to him? But this time I will not have him back. I am not going to hire him again, because he is not to be trusted. And last haying, what did I tell him? I told him, if you leave now, that ended it. So Warren is angry. And then he asks, what good is he? Who else will harbor him at his age for the little he can do? What help he is, there is no depending on. Off he goes always when I need him most. He says, why should I hire him again? He is old. Who else will take him up? Who will harbor him? So the word harbor, I think, is significant. To harbor also means to give shelter, to give refuge. So he says, at his age, will anybody else hire him? Why should I? And there is no depending on him, because he'll go off at any time he pleases. Off he goes always when I need him the most. He thinks he ought to earn a little pay, enough at least to buy tobacco with, so he won't have to beg and be beholden. So he says, when he needs money, he comes here, and as soon as he gets a little money to buy tobacco, off he goes, just because he doesn't want to beg. All right, I say, I can't afford to pay any fixed wages, though wish I could. Someone else can, then someone else will have to. So he says, each time when this man behaves like this, I keep telling myself, all right, I can't afford to pay any fixed wages, though I wish I could, so someone else can, then someone else will have to. So let him go wherever he wants to, let someone else pay him. This is all I can do. So we understand that Warren is not a very rich farmer. He's just coming up in life, and so he doesn't have a lot of money to waste on people who keep coming and going like this. I shouldn't mind his bettering himself if that was what it was. You can be certain, when he begins like that, there is someone at him trying to coax him off with pocket money. In haying time, when any help is scarce, in winter he comes back to us. I am done. So he says, see, I am not angry with him, because if he wants to better himself, in the sense I can't give him fixed wages because we don't have that kind of money. So if he finds a work in a place, in a farm, where they'll pay him better, that's fine with me. Let him go and let him better himself. I have no grudge against that. But that is not what this man does. When he comes here, he starts working, then somebody else coaxes him or slowly tempts him with more pocket money. Immediately he'll leave us and run off. And that too, at haying time, we know that it's very difficult to find people to help because everybody is busy. And then he runs off, leaving us to do all the work. And in winter, when there is nothing to do, he comes back. I am done. He says, not anymore. This time, I am not going to hire this man. And so Mary says, shh, not so loud. He'll hear you. And so Warren says, what if he hears me? I want him to. He'll have to soon or late. So a typical male kind of attitude. So he says, let him hear me. There's no harm. Anyway, he'll come to know. I'm going to tell him anyway. But Mary says, no, not so loud. Let him not hear you. And then Mary tells him, he's worn out. He's tired. He's asleep beside the stove. When I came up from Rose, I found him here, huddled against the barn door, fast asleep. A miserable sight, and frightening too. You needn't smile. I didn't recognize him. I wasn't looking for him. And he's changed. Wait till you see. So Mary says, see, it's not like the way he comes back always. This time he's really ill. He's totally worn out. And inside he's sleeping beside the stove. when she had gone to visit maybe the neighboring farm, the house of the Rowe family. So when she came back from there, I found him here. He was huddled against the barn door and he was fast asleep, and it was a miserable sight and frightening too, because I couldn't even recognize him. I was wondering, who is this man here, a stranger? Then I had to, and I wasn't looking for him, means I wasn't expecting him, so I didn't even recognize him. He has changed so much. Wait till you see. And the husband smiles in between. So she says, don't smile. You too will feel the same. Just take a look at him. He has changed so much. Wait till you see. And the husband asks, where did you say he'd been? So where was he all these days? Did he say anything? So she says, he didn't say. I dragged him to the house because he could hardly stand up. So she says, I dragged him into the house and gave him tea and tried to make him smoke. So she gave him maybe a cigarette so that he'll warm up a bit. I tried to make him talk about his travels. Nothing would do. He just kept nodding off. Means he was dozing off. He was so tired. He simply couldn't keep his head straight. What did he say? Did he say anything? But little. Anything. Mary, confess. He said he'd come to ditch the meadow for me. So he says, Mary, tell me the truth. What did he say? Did he say that he'll ditch the meadow for me, in the sense that the meadow, the ditches need to be cleared time to time? So he says, did he say that he'll ditch the meadow for me? Because often this is what he usually does. He disappears and then one day he'll come back and he'll say, let me do that for you. Let me do this for you. So this time, did he say he'll ditch the meadow for me? So in a warning tone, Mary says, Warren. But did he? I just want to know. So then she says, of course he did. That's what he said. He can hardly talk, but in spite of that, he told me that he'll do some work here. Of course he did. What would you have him say? Surely you wouldn't grudge the poor old man some humble way to save his self-respect. So he says, of course, he is an old man, but even then he has something called self-respect. He doesn't expect us to pay him for free. So he should definitely do something. He knows that. And so yes, it's true. He told me that he will ditch the meadows. So don't be angry at him. He's only trying to preserve his self-respect. He's not begging us for anything. He added, if you really care to know, he meant to clear the upper pasture too. So he said that he will clear the ditches here in the meadow, and he'll also clear the upper pasture, if you want to know. That sounds like something you've heard before? Warren. So I guess Warren must be smiling. Oh, this is what he usually says. So he says, that sounds like something you have heard before? Warren, I wish you could have heard the way he jumbled everything. I stopped to look 2 or 3 times. He made me feel so queer to see if he was talking in his sleep. So he says, she tells him, this time he was kind of jumbled up. All his sentences were muddled, and I had to stop in between and look at his face to see whether he was talking to me or whether he was talking in his sleep. He ran on Harold Wilson. You remember? The boy you had in haying for 4 years since? He's finished school and teaching in his college. Silas declares you'll have to get him back. So she says, you know what, the Silas was talking, he was talking as if there's no connection between what he's saying. He ran on means he went on speaking about Harold Wilson. And this Harold Wilson, you remember, was a young man we had on a farm for haying some 4 years before. He had finished school and now he's teaching in a college. And Silas kept saying that we'll have to bring that fellow back, Harold Wilson, who's working now in the college. We'll have to get him back. He says they too will make a team for work. So it seems he told Mary, you just bring that boy back, Harold Wilson, and together me and this Harold Wilson, we'll work. Between them, they will lay this farm as smooth. So together, the 2 of us will do all the work on this farm. The way he mixed that in with other things, he thinks young Wilson a likely lad, though daft on education. You know how they fought all through July under the blazing sun. Silas upon the cart to build the load, Harold along beside to pitch it on. So he says that he kept on talking about Harold Wilson, and he said that he was a likely lad, a nice boy, only thing daft on education, because Silas considered him foolish because he went on to get educated, because the generation to which Silas belonged to, they did not believe in college education and such things. And so he says that boy is a daft, he's a fool to go and get himself educated. But you remember, when they were working together, they were always fighting with each other because they simply could not see eye to eye. And now he wants the boy back. Yes, and so Warren says, yes, I took care to keep well out of earshot. He says, yes, I very well remember the way they used to have horrible fights, shouting at each other always. And what Warren did was, he needed both the workers. So in order not to take sides, what he did was, he always used to keep out of earshot, in the sense he used to stand far away from them so that he will not hear the fight and he will not have to interfere. Well, those days troubled Silas like a dream. You wouldn't think they would. How some things linger. So Mary says, even I am surprised, because somehow it's strange how some things linger in your memory. And now then he was always fighting with Harold Wilson. Now he says that he wants to work with the boy. How strange. Harold's young college boy's assurance piqued him. After so many, piqued him means irritated him. Okay, so Harold was a boy who was studying in college, and so he had his own views about how to do things. So that was always in opposition to what this old man Silas said, and that is why they used to have fights. And his self-assurance and his confidence piqued him or irritated him. After so many years, he still keeps finding good arguments he sees he might have used. I sympathize. I know just how it feels to think of the right thing to say too late. And so even now, even when he is kind of almost half lost his wits, he talks about Harold Wilson and the things that he should have told Harold Wilson. And he says, I know how it feels to think of the right thing to say too late. That is one sentence I too agree with. Sometimes when you talk to some people, you don't really get the right thing to say, and later on, and you know that might be the only chance you will get to talk like that to that person, and when you come home or after a few hours, you would think, oh my God, I should have told him that, I should have told him this. But unfortunately at that time, or your friends might ask you, why didn't you say this to him? That would have kept him, that would have forced him to shut his mouth. But then at that time, unfortunately, such an idea didn't even come to our mind, isn't it? Such things happen. So that's, she says, I know just how it feels to think of the right thing to say too late. Harold's associated in his mind with Latin. He asked me what I thought of Harold saying he studied Latin like the violin because he liked it. That an argument. He said he couldn't make the boy believe he could find water with a hazel prong, which showed how much good school had ever done him. So this boy Harold, he studied Latin, and he used to talk maybe about Latin and such things. He studied Latin like the violin. He was an expert in Latin because he liked it. And now this man says that when he said that you could find water with a hazel prong. Now hazel prong, now in our country too, I have heard that earlier in ancient times, or even now, I think there are people who know the technique. They hold a prong, a branch, a Y-shaped branch in their hand, and they walk through the farm, and they know how to locate water, like before digging a well. In order to locate the correct place for the well, they use a particular kind of a stick which is carved out in a certain shape, and when everybody can't, we can't do that, only experts know that. And when they come to a place where there is water, this stick, it kind of turns, and then that tells them that here, if you dig here, you will get water. So I guess in America too they have that practice. So that is why finding water with a hazel prong. And so it seems he told Harold that this is a technique with which you can find where there is water, and Harold wouldn't believe him. And so he says that is how school education spoils people. So which showed how much good school education. So the earthly kind of wisdom, the wisdom that you gain from living with the soil, in the soil, working with nature, that is lost when people go to school. When you spend your time in the school instead of on the farm, you don't learn such techniques. And so this Silas told Mary that that is what schooling did to that boy. He doesn't even know basic things about the farm. He wanted to go over that, but most of all, he thinks if he could have another chance to teach him how to build a load of hay. So he says that he really wants. That's what he told Mary while she was making tea for him and giving it to him. He said, "If I get Harold once again, I can surely teach him a few things. I can teach him how to make a hay loft." You must have seen hay lofts after the harvest. All the hay is piled up. In different countries, it's done in a different way. I have seen hay lofts built in a conical shape. And it's not easy to build a hay loft because the hay shouldn't fall off. They stack it in such a way that the hay remains there. And so he says, if Harold comes back, I would teach him how to build a load of hay. And Warren now talks and he says, I know, that is Silas's one accomplishment. Yes, of course. That is one thing I agree to. Silas is an expert in making hay lofts. He bundles every forkful in its place and tags and numbers it for future reference. So he can find and easily dislodge it in the unload. Silas does that well. He takes it out in bunches like big birds' nests. Silas does that well. He takes it out in bunches like big birds' nests. You never see him standing on the hay he's trying to lift, straining to lift himself. So he says, Warren, gives complete credit, full credit to Silas for his efficiency in making hay lofts. He says he's such an expert, he does it so effortlessly. Like, he takes out hay from the big hay loft like carrying bird's nest as if it has no weight at all. You'll never feel that he has any strain. He's such an expert at managing the hay. So he thinks, now this I think is Mary talking, he thinks if he could teach him that, him is Harold Wilson, he'd be some good perhaps to someone in the world. He hates to see a boy the fool of books. Poor Silas, so concerned for other folk, nothing to look backward to with pride, and nothing to look forward to with hope. So now and never any different. So he says he really wants to teach Harold how to make a good hay loft because he'll be of some use to other people. And because he believes that books are of no help. What can a man do by getting educated? Nothing. And at that time, instead of spending time on books, if he comes and learns how to make a hay loft, he'll be of use to some people. And so Mary says, poor guy, poor Silas, he's always concerned about others. He has nothing to look backward with pride, nothing to look forward with hope. Now this Silas is a loner. He doesn't have a family, he's not married. So he has nothing to look backward. He has not accomplished anything, worthy of speaking in his life. And he has no hope about his future too. Because there's no family, no children, no grandchildren, no home, nothing. So now and never any different. So this was how he used to be. Even now he's like that. So we can see a picture of this Silas slowly evolving. A poor man, a wanderer, one who doesn't stick on in any place, one who's not really bothered much about money. All he wants is some money to buy tobacco. He has never bothered to earn money or save money or to build a house or to build a family. Nothing. A kind of a happy-go-lucky fellow. But now he's old. He has nobody to call his own. Part of the moon was falling down the west, dragging the whole sky with it to the hills. How beautiful. So he says that the sky, the moon was slowly going down the west, and it was as if the moon was dragging the whole sky with it to the hills. Its light poured softly in her lap, So now they're sitting out in the moonlight. She saw it and spread her apron to it. So she saw the moonlight falling on her lap and she spread her apron so that the moonlight would fall on it. She put out her hand among the harp-like morning glory strings, taut with the dew from garden bed to eaves, as if she played unheard some tenderness that wrought on him beside her in the night. So she puts her hand out and she touches the morning glory. Morning glory, is a creeper with dark purple flowers. So the leaves and the strings are there. She puts out her hand and touches those plants, and very tenderly she touches them, and she says, "Warren, he has come home to die. You needn't be afraid he'll leave you this time." So she tells him very softly, "Warren, Silas is going to die now. He's very old, he's not well, so you needn't be afraid that he'll leave you this time." "Home," he mocked gently. So he says, "What do you mean by home? Is this his home? This is our home. It is not Silas's home." He mocked gently, "Home." So she says, "Yes, what else but home? It all depends on what you mean by home. Of course, he's nothing to us any more than was the hound that came a stranger to us out of the woods, worn out upon the trail. Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in." So that's such a beautiful statement. So she says, "Why are you mocking? Of course, this is his home. It all depends on what you mean by home. Of course, he's not related to us. He's just like that hound. Hound is a wild dog that came to us as a stranger, a lost dog. Somewhere, as it was wandering, it came out of the woods to us, and it was here for some time, and it became its home. Same way here, this is the home for Silas." And she says, this is a very famous line. I have seen it quoted often. Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. So it is a place where you will not be refused an entry. So he has come here because he feels that this is his home. I should have called it something you somehow haven't to deserve. So she says that you really don't have to deserve. You don't have to do anything to make yourself worthy of your home. All sorts of people can be there in a home, in a house. Some people, some children, they become very famous. They do outstanding things. They make the name of the home known to all. But there might be some who don't do anything at all. You don't have to do anything to deserve to belong to a home. Warren leaned out. So she is looking at it just like a woman would look at it, in a very emotional terms. So she says, "Don't mock at him. Maybe he felt this is where he belongs and he has come back, and this time he has come. This is the last time he will be coming here, and he will not be leaving either." Warren leaned out and took a step or two, picked up a little stick and brought it back and broke it in his hand and tossed it by. So Warren is thinking about it. He is really wondering whether he should permit Silas to remain there. So he takes a stick and breaks it. So all that shows us that he is a little disturbed. He is thinking of something. So he says, "Silas has better claim on us, you think, than on his brother? 13 little miles as the road winds would bring him to his door. Silas has walked that far, no doubt, today. Why didn't he go there? His brother is rich, a somebody, director in the bank." So he says, "Do you think Silas has better claim on our home than on his brother's home? His brother's home is just 13 miles from here. Definitely he would have walked all the way right in front of that house. Then why didn't he go there? Why did he have to come here? He should have gone to his brother's house. His brother is a rich man, and his brother is supposed to be a director at a bank or something." But she says, "He never told us that. He has never told us about this brother being a director of the bank." But Warren says, "So what if he didn't tell us? We know it though. I think his brother ought to help, of course. I'll see to it. See to that if there is a need. He ought of right to take him in, and might be willing to. He may be better than appearances. So he says that I think we should take him to his brother's house, because it is the duty of the brother to take care of him. So he has to take him in, and I'll see to it that he does. And he ought of right to take him in. He might be willing to. We don't know. We've only heard about him. Maybe he's not as bad as people say he is. So maybe we should take Silas to his brother's house. So now she speaks and she says, but have some pity on Silas. Do you think if he had any pride in claiming kin or anything he looked for from his brother, he'd keep so still about him all this time? So then she says, have some pity on him. So do you think if he had any pride in claiming kin or anything he looked for from his brother, if he expected any such help from his brother, do you think he would have kept quiet about him? Won't he tell us about his brother? There must be something wrong there. Maybe he doesn't like going to his brother. I wonder what's between them. The man says, Warren says, I wonder what's between them. So Mary says, I can tell you, Silas is what he is. We wouldn't mind him, but just the kind that kinsfolk can't abide. He never did a thing so very bad. He don't know why he isn't quite as good as anyone. Worthless though he is, he won't be made ashamed to please his brother. So he says Silas is just what he is. He's an ordinary person, and definitely he's not the kind of a person that a family would welcome, because he's not a bad person. At the same time, he's not as good as the others. So most often families don't express a belongingness to such people who are good for nothing. The families too don't want them. The families reject such people. So that is what Silas is. That is why maybe he doesn't go back home, maybe because he knows that he is not welcome in his brother's house. I can't think C ever hurt anyone. C is in short for Silas. No, but he hurt my heart. So Warren says, I can't think C ever hurt anyone. So I don't think Silas would have done anything to hurt his brother's pride. And now Mary speaks. She says, no, but he hurt my heart the way he lay and rolled his old head on that sharp-edged chair back. He wouldn't let me put him on the lounge. You must go in and see what you can do. So she says, I really felt bad for him. My heart ached for him, because he was sitting down there and he was rolling his head, maybe because he was uncomfortable, uneasy. I tried to put him on the lounge where he can lie down, but he wouldn't. You must go in and see what you can do. I made the bed up for him there tonight. You'd be surprised at him, how much he's broken. His working days are done, I'm sure of it. So I have made the bed for him. So somehow you just go there, see whether you can get him to the bed. He's so broken, he's so weak. His working days are done. I'm sure of it. I'd not be in a hurry to say that. So then Warren says, let's not be too hasty in our decision. Maybe he'll get better soon. So she says, I haven't been. Go, look, see for yourself. But Warren, please remember how it is. He's come to help you ditch the meadow. He has a plan. You mustn't laugh at him. He may not speak of it, and then he may. I'll sit and see if that small sailing cloud will hit or miss the moon. So she says, you won't understand until you see him. So you better go inside, take a look at him, see for yourself. You will understand that he is in a very bad condition. I have no hopes that he'll survive the night. So you go in, but Warren, remember how it is. Don't ask him anything else. He has come here to help ditch the meadow. He has a plan. Don't laugh at him. Don't mock at him. Okay? He may not speak of it, or he may speak of it. We don't know. But I don't want you to start a topic and disturb him in any way. Don't hurt him with your words. I'll sit and see if that small sailing cloud will hit or miss the moon. So she says, you go in, I'm not coming in. Let me sit here and look at the moon. There is a small cloud sailing there. Let me see whether the cloud will hit the moon or miss the moon. You go in, let me sit here. It hit the moon. Then there were three there, making a dim row: the moon, the little silver cloud, and she. So they were all sitting there. There were three there, sitting very quiet. The moon was there, the little silver cloud, and she. So the three of them sat there outside, still and motionless. She almost knew what to expect. Now Warren went in, Warren came back. Warren returned too soon, it seemed to her, slipped to her side, caught up her hand, and waited. So Warren had gone inside to take a look at Silas, and he comes back, and she thinks he came back too soon. He comes, he doesn't say anything, he sits beside her, takes her hand, and waited. And she too has almost guessed what has happened by then. So she says, "Warren?" She questioned. "Dead," was all he answered. So that is how the poem ends. So this is a poem that, as I told you, that always, touches me whenever I read this poem, because there are so many things that pulls at your heartstrings in this poem. One is this character called Silas, this man who has nobody to take care of him, who has no home to go to, who has no relatives to own him. So the plight of this man, and though he was quite irresponsible maybe when he was alive, he still has a lot of self-respect, because even when he comes back in a condition where he can hardly walk, where he can hardly sit up, he still offers to do work. He doesn't beg for mercy, but he offers to work. And the couple, the young couple, Mary and Warren, they too, especially Mary, she's so full of humanitarian kindness. She knows that Silas has not always behaved in the right manner with them. He has often abandoned them at times when they were in dire need of help. But in spite of all that, she is able to discern that he is in trouble, that he is nearing his end, and so she forgives him all that he has done to them. Not that he has done any great crime, but she is so sensitive to his needs, and she also convinces her husband to be kind to him. And Warren again is not a cruel man, though he is angry because he must have been the one who suffered when Silas went off unannounced. But in spite of that, the kindness that they have for the man is very evident in the poem. And again, the idea that sometimes it is not your kith and kin, or it is not blood relations that matter. Here, this man seems to have a brother, but then he doesn't go to his brother in time of need. Instead, he comes to this house, because this is where he feels more of a closeness than what he feels for his own brother. So how human relations are not always kind of, the depth and the love, it is not always based on blood relations alone. It is the kind of the affinity and the kind of the love that you share for people. And sometimes friendships and such working relationships take on more value than familial ties. So that is something again that we see in this poem. And so I don't have a lot to talk about the poem, but I just wanted to share it with you because this is one poem that I hold very close to my heart. And I often wonder why this is not prescribed in the syllabus in many places, because I feel that people should read such poems, especially youngsters, so that they learn to appreciate relations and the value of people. You don't always judge people by their worth, by what they can do for you, or by their wealth, but you judge people even by their simplicity. And sometimes you have to accept people who are good for nothings too, because they too need a place among us. It would be a very inhuman kind of a society if we can appreciate and if we can accept only the best ones and the good ones. What about the lesser ones? People who are not very good at anything, people who are in some way different, people who can do nothing to prove their mettle. Don't they too deserve a place amongst us? So I think that is the message that this poem conveys. And again, the innate goodness of the people in living in villages, of how they are more forgiving, more understanding of each other, the kind of a camaraderie that exists in such places. All that is brought out in this poem. So I'm happy that I got an opportunity to share this poem with you, and I would request that more of you would read it. And Robert Frost has written many more such poems, poems that are not known, at least in our in circles, but poems that really touch you deep and strong. So this is one such poem, and I'm sure that I will never tire of reading this poem. No matter how many times I read it again, it will always remain one of my favorites.